Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
How's everybody doing today? Wonderful, great, back to eating. Yes, fill up, guys. We're going to be jumping into our study today. It is entitled Dreams Fulfilled. Dreams Fulfilled. Now, I know we haven't been gathering as much and talking about our Torah portions for the last several weeks. How many of you are on the Torah portions or trying to keep up with the Torah portions? Okay. Handful of us, okay. If you have not yet gotten on studying the Torah portions, that's a section of the Bible that we read each week. And we put out a study guide to help you along in your studies. And you have a great time, especially during Shabbat, Friday evening to Saturday evening, a great time to go over these portions, not just by yourself, but with your Torah families, or in your own households, your own families. All right? Have family worship together. What I like about the Torah portions is it gets all of us as a community studying the same thing, no matter where we are, at the same time. All right? And I gain a lot of inspiration when I go through these portions. Now, mind you, this is what, our fourth year going through the portions? And every time I go through it, I pick up something fresh and something new. It's the same things that we're reading, but there's a new revelation, a new message that God has for me every time I read it. And there are things there that I see that I've never seen before. I encourage you guys, if you really want to start studying the Bible, doing the Torah portions is a great, easy way to do it, and a way that we can all share with one another week by week, all right, as a community. The portions that we've been reading these last few weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, have all been about the story of Joseph. Who remembers Joseph? Yep, you know who the guy is? The guy with the multicolored jacket, the favorite son of Jacob. All right. And his story takes place starting about Genesis chapter 37, all the way to the end of Genesis. So this week, this is the final reading of Genesis. We're in the 12th week of our Torah portions. It took us 12 weeks to read through Genesis, but the last 4 portions have all been about Joseph. That is a large chunk of the book of Genesis that's specifically about Joseph. What is so important about his story that we spend so much time there? Now, most of us know the story of Adam and Eve, right? Most of us have heard about Noah and the ark, right? We've heard about the Tower of Babel, right? And we've heard all these different stories. Everybody knows them. And then we get to Joseph and they're like, oh, that's the guy with the coat, right? Mommy. And then you could probably point out a few things about his story, but there's so much. It's so rich, and I don't want any of us to miss the details of his story that reveal so much truth about the Messiah. Okay. So here's Joseph. His story starts in Genesis chapter 37. And here we're introduced to Joseph. He's about 17 years old. And he's there with his brothers out in the field. Most of his brothers are older, all right? Remember, his father Jacob had children from 4 different women, all right? They were one big happy family, all right? But all these brothers in the field are not his full brothers. Joseph only had one full brother from the same mother. What was his name? Benjamin, the youngest of all the brothers, okay? So Joseph, at about 17 years old, that's a lot of time for his brothers to catch on that he was favored by their dad. All right? All these older brothers like, what's up with this punk? He comes up and he has dad's favor. Look at this. What a spoiled brat. Right? He goes out, he has a dream one day, and he decides to share it with his brothers. Right? You ever share your dreams with people? Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it sounds weird to the person that's listening, right? Well, here comes Joseph, and he's like, hey guys, out in the field. At 17, he shouldn't be working in the field just yet. But he was out there with his brothers anyway, while they're all slaving away. Hey guys, I had this dream. We were all bundling wheat, and all your bundles, 11 bundles, started bowing down to my bundle. And mine was standing straight up. And they're like, ah, whatever. We're not bowing down to you. What a punk, right? He comes back with another dream. And he decides to share with his brothers. You know what? This time there was the sun, the moon, and 11 stars. And all of them prostrated themselves before me. He didn't just share this with his brothers. He shared it with his father too. And even his father Jacob said to him, "What? Who do you think you are, son? You think that me, your brothers, your mother, that we would all bow down to you?" Although he was trying to correct his son, he kept these things in his mind. That's what it says in the Torah. He hung on to those words. So these brothers had enough of Joseph. And they're like, listen, this guy, we got to do something about him. They had already planned to kill Joseph because they hated him so much. Right? But one of the brothers decided, you know what, let's not kill him. Let's not have his blood on our hands. Why don't we just throw him in this well? Maybe he'll die down there. And the brother, his reason for throwing him in the well, he planned that he would come back and pick up Joseph and deliver him back to the father, and he'll be the big hero, right? Do you remember which brother that was?
Reuben.
Reuben. And where in the order was Reuben?
The eldest.
He was the eldest. He had already fallen out of his father's favor a long time ago. All right? And he's the one that should have the birthright, double portions of blessings, all that, right? But he's already passed over because he messed up. He slept with one of his father's wives, right? So he thought, maybe if I bring Joseph back to dad, then everything will be okay. However, while Joseph was in the pit and Reuben went away, some of the other brothers came up with an idea. Well, we're just going to let this guy go down. Why don't we make something off of it, right? Why don't we sell him as a slave, right? So there were some Midianites passing by, and they said, oh, look at those guys. What a great opportunity. So they went down and fished their brother out of the well and handed him over to these Midianite travelers as they were passing by. And they sold him as a slave. Reuben comes back and he's looking for Joseph. What happened? Where's Joseph? We're like, oh, don't worry, we got rid of him. He's sold off as a slave. Reuben's distraught. What am I going to do now? Joseph's gone. He's messed up again. All right? But they didn't let Joseph go, sold off as a slave, without taking that coat of many colors that his father bestowed upon him. This gift of this coat, this beautiful coat that showed favor for his son. They decided to keep that coat and do something with it. They dipped it in blood. Now there he is being sold off as a slave without his jacket. They took the coat, dipped it in blood, and brought it back to their father Jacob. And they told him, we found this jacket. Joseph is gone. The understanding, he has died. This is his blood. Jacob was distraught, losing his favorite son. So imagine all that drama between Joseph and his brothers happens in one chapter of Genesis. All right? We're jumping to Genesis 39. Here we see Joseph, and he is now, we see him in Potiphar's house. Okay? Potiphar is this high-ranking Egyptian official in Egypt serving the Pharaoh. And one of the things that we read about is that Yehovah was with Joseph. And we'll see this phrase come up a few times during Joseph's story. Yehovah was with Joseph. And everything that Joseph did in Potiphar's house, serving as a servant there, he prospered in all his ways. Potiphar saw that Yehovah was with Joseph and how well he was managing the affairs in the household, that he raised up Joseph to be in charge of his entire household. He was the chief steward for this Potiphar. He had the favor, a slave brought in from a well, now elevated in one of the top chief officials in Egypt in his home. He was in charge of this guy's stuff. Potiphar trusted him so much that he would leave for days on end and then come and leave everything to Joseph's care. He trusted him that much to handle all his affairs, probably his investments. Everything he did prospered, and it benefited Potiphar. One day while Potiphar's away, Mrs. Potiphar, right, saw how young and good-looking this young Joseph was, how favored he was, what a strapping young guy, an upright character. And she wanted to seduce him. And she called to him a few times, Joseph, come here, Joseph, come, sit here, right? Inviting him to come over and be with her. Joseph refused. He's like, I will not go against my master. You are my master's wife. This is an evil thing. I will not touch you. And he would flee from this temptation. He would flee from this test and trial that this woman is trying to seduce him with. One time, he's fleeing from her, and she grabs hold of his robe and tears off part of his garment. And I'm sure that if he got stuck, he'd just untangle himself and run out anyway, right? I am not going to get caught with my master's wife. That's it. But as he's running away, she cries out, help, help, rape, rape, me too, right? It's like, that guy over there, stop him. He tried to do something to me, and she lied about Joseph. Do you know where that lie got him in prison? He got thrown into prison. Potiphar heard about it, and he's like, no way, I trusted you, man. No way. My wife said you tried to do this to her. Behind bars. Interesting thing about this Potiphar. The name Potiphar actually means something to do about the sun god, Ra. Potiphar, Ra. Right? And he was a devout Egyptian nationality. He was from that land. He was a servant to the Pharaoh at the time. Interesting thing though, the Pharaoh at the time was not an Egyptian. He was not an Egyptian. He was part of the people that came in and kind of put themselves up in the ranks and made slaves of the Egyptians. Right? And we'll study a little bit more about that in a second. Okay? But this Pharaoh, this Potiphar was a devout Egyptian of highest rank, all right, and had the favor of the Pharaoh. He was the chief of the guard? Yeah. The bodyguard for the Pharaoh. So Joseph gets thrown in prison, but even when he's in prison, we read that Jehovah was with him. All right? And he found favor even while he was in prison, that he was elevated to a special position in the prison. All right? Once a prisoner, and now he's the steward or the attendant for some of the top officials of Pharaoh that get thrown into prison.
Please fix it.
Two of the officials were the cupbearer and the baker. Both of them did something that obviously upset Pharaoh. They got thrown into prison. And while they're there in prison, Joseph is put in charge of them as their attendant. While they're in prison, these cupbearer and the baker both have disturbing dreams, or dreams that they just wanted to understand. Now, it's normal at this point in time for people to share their dreams, but they would normally pay people, like seers, magicians, wise people, to interpret the dreams for them. However, here, these two Egyptians are sitting in this prison, and they don't have access to any of these seers. But Joseph comes by, and he hears about these men, and they're having their dreams, and they want to understand them. So Joseph comes by, hears their dreams, and he gives credit to Jehovah, that don't all interpretations belong to Jehovah. He's not claiming that he has the interpretation. He takes no credit for himself. So we see him as a servant in Potiphar's house. Jehovah is with him. He finds favor. We see him as a prisoner in prison, and even there, he has favor. Jehovah was with him. And Jehovah, although he never speaks to Joseph, he gives some inspiration to Joseph. He gives him the meaning, the interpretations of dreams. Okay? The cupbearer said, okay, so I had this dream, and there's this vine. And the vine had 3 branches, and grapes started to grow from them. And there was a cup of Pharaoh that was in his hand. And they started to squeeze the grapes into the cup. What does it mean? Okay. Joseph said, well, that the 3 branches means 3 days. In 3 days, you are going to be restored to your office as a chief cupbearer for Pharaoh. In 3 days. All right? And he's like, wow, that's pretty good. I like that. I like that dream. And the baker heard that that was a favorable interpretation for his dream. And he was excited to share with Joseph, oh, I had a dream too. I had a dream too. If he's getting restored, maybe I'll be restored to my position as well. And the baker says, so, I had a dream. I was carrying 3 baskets of bread on my head. And on the top basket were a mix of many types of bread. And I was carrying them to Pharaoh, and all of a sudden, these birds start coming and pecking at the bread. And Joseph turns to him and says, oh, baker, those 3 baskets are also 3 days. But in 3 days, it means your head will be taken off of you. So the cupbearer would be restored, and the baker, his head would be taken off him. I'd be like, please don't tell me that. I should have told you my dream. 3 days. What was so significant 3 days later? Joseph trusted the interpretation that he received from God. He shared it with the men. And he told the cupbearer, when you are restored to your position, please remember me. Give a good word for me when you get back to Pharaoh. Let him know that I'm rotting away here, wrongfully accused of raping this woman. I had nothing to... I'm innocent, get me out of here. Okay? 3 days later, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, Pharaoh. We celebrate our gods in this way. Oh, the pagan festivities. And so that's it. We don't read about birthdays in the Bible very often. But the times that we do, it was people like Pharaoh. Right? One of the birthdays we read about was Pharaoh. This was 3 days after the interpretation was given to Joseph. 3 days later, both the baker and the cupbearer are brought before Pharaoh, and their heads are lifted up, and he restores the cupbearer to his position, and then he lifts off the head of the baker and hangs him. But it's not hanging like with a noose. He hangs his head. Typically what happens, you notice that guy behind him, he's holding a spear. What would happen is you're decapitated, and your head would be impaled on a stick, and it would be planted there, and people passing by would see this as some sort of a warning. Don't mess with this Pharaoh. He has the power to put your head on a stick. Gross, right? But sure enough, the interpretations came true. The celebration for Pharaoh went on, and the cupbearer forgot all about Joseph rotting in that prison. Joseph was in the prison for a couple of years. Before we go to Joseph's timeline up to this point, it's interesting to understand why did they make such a detail about 3 baskets of bread being carried on the head of the baker. You see, in Egypt, the men would carry their things on their head. In a lot of the Oriental other cultures, it's the women that carry these things over their head. The jugs of whatever, all that stuff. But in Egypt, the women would carry their burdens over their shoulder, while the men would carry it on their head. This tells us that these servants were Egyptian. Okay? They were Egyptians. Why do I keep making this point? They're all in Egypt. Aren't they all Egyptians? No. But the servants, and in high positions, they were taken care of. But if you cross that Pharaoh, that ruler who's not an Egyptian, well, he has no problem saying, well, off with your head. Joseph's timeline. We learned that he's his father's favorite son. He was the eldest of the beloved Rachel, the favorite wife, the first one that he wanted. Rachel only bore 2 children, Joseph and Benjamin. Okay. He was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery in Egypt. He served in Potiphar's house from the age of 17 to about 28 for about 11 years. He was in the prison for at least 2 years. And then finally, he's released from prison, all right? And he's 30 years old when he stands before Pharaoh to interpret his dreams. So in Genesis 41, we see that Pharaoh also has dreams. So you see this theme throughout Joseph's story so far. We're introduced to him at 17. He's sharing his dreams with his brothers. How many dreams were there? 2 dreams. We see him in prison with the cupbearer and the baker. How many dreams are there? 2. All right, and now we're going to encounter him with dreams again, Pharaoh's dreams. Let's see what's going on here. Pharaoh wants someone to interpret his disturbing dreams. Joseph is 30 years old. Pharaoh's dreams disturb him because they seem so real. Have you ever had a dream that just stands out more than all your other dreams? Sometimes it feels like a warning. It feels like, oh no, am I supposed to pay attention to this? All right, that's what it was here. It just seems so real. So Pharaoh calls all his magicians, who are really his brain trust. All right, the mystery Babylon religions was part of Egyptian life. Okay, all these pagan religions. The wise men were the intellectuals, but his men could not interpret the dreams. So the cupbearer finally remembers, oh, Joseph. He interpreted our dreams while we were in the prison. Let's go call Joseph. Joseph comes up after he's been forgotten about for almost a couple of years. And Joseph stands up and he admits that it's not he, but God who interprets. Do not all interpretations belong to Jehovah. And he tells them that these dreams are prophetic. The first dream, 7 cows, 7 healthy cows are seen grazing in this lush field. And out of the water comes 7 sickly cows. And they come up and devour the 7 healthy cows. Weird dream, but it seems so real. And the second dream was like it. 7 stalks of corn, wheat, right, grains, in fullness. And then followed by 7 sickly stalks. So here's the interpretation. 7 healthy cows, followed by 7 sickly ones. 7 healthy stalks of corn, and then 7 sickly ones. How many dreams? 2 dreams. The first one concerning livestock, the second concerning crops. And both are the major elements of the food supply that were going to be affected by what is coming. He said, God gives sufficient warning to those who pay heed to him. So he gave warning to the ruler of the land, right? And the ruler of the land sought out meaning to these dreams. Do you think that Pharaoh just dreamed these dreams by himself? Or does it seem that Jehovah gave him that dream? Jehovah gives the dream, and then Jehovah gives the interpretation. They both came from him, the source of it all. This was Jehovah's way of warning Pharaoh. He didn't talk to Pharaoh. He didn't send someone with words like he sent Moses, right? These are the words you speak. He didn't do that. He gave him a dream, and then he gave Joseph the ability to interpret the dream for Pharaoh. God gives sufficient warning for those who pay heed to him. There will be 7 wonderfully, unusually abundant years of food growth and harvest before 7 years of terrible famine. Jehovah was with him. He found favor before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said, indeed, this interpretation, he trusted the word that came from Joseph. And then he elevated Joseph to be second in command in all of Egypt next to Pharaoh. A slave at 17 from the bottom of a well, sold to these travelers, put into Potiphar's house, thrown into jail, forgotten about in jail, and all this time, at age 30, from 17 to 30, he was just his servant. Now he's elevated as second highest in command in all of Egypt. Joseph was given a new name, Zaphnath-Paneah. The Egyptian meaning of the name is he who is called life. He was given a new name because an Egyptian name, being second in command, Pharaoh wanted to ensure that he was known by all people. He wanted to elevate him and make a big deal out of it, and giving him this name, Zaphnath-Paneah, he who is called life. Well, people are going to be seeking him out for life. Interesting.
Tim,
Yes.
was it also Joseph that they were resistant for him to be the second in command because of the language that he doesn't know all the languages and then
Partly, yes. But Pharaoh did everything in his power to ensure that Joseph had a steady way to just be in power, right?
But the angel visited Joseph and like for one night he was able to study all this language, and when he got tested,
Is that in the Torah portion? Where was that?
Gaza.
No, I missed it in the portion, sorry. Let's just go off based on what's in the Torah itself, okay? All right, so here, Joseph's loyalty, Pharaoh wanted to ensure that Joseph would remain loyal. So he gives him everything, gives him a new name, gives him status. He also gives him a wife, okay? Pharaoh gave him a wife, Asenath, all right, who was the daughter of a priest of the temple of On. On is the city of the sun god. Okay? So Joseph marries the daughter of the priest of the sun god Re. Alright, so one of the Hebrew people, his wife is married, he's married to this woman, daughter of the priest of the sun god Ra. Okay, by the 6th year of abundance, remember there's 7 years of unusual abundance. By the 6th year, 1 year before the onset of the famine, Joseph now has 2 sons by his Egyptian wife, Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay? Manasseh and Ephraim are Hebrew names. Okay? However, their nationality is determined by their mother. Okay? The mother's nationality and genealogy determined that of the children. So Ephraim and Manasseh were Egyptians. What does that mean? They were Gentiles. Joseph's sons were considered Gentiles. Remember, you have God's people, the Hebrews, all right, Israel, and everybody else, Gentiles, or the nations. When you read in the Bible and you read the nations, it's talking about the non-Israelites, the non-Hebrew people, the Gentiles. So the vizier of Egypt. Now we're talking about the rulers at this point. Pharaoh, right, belonged to the Hyksos people, the Hyksos rulers. The Hyksos people were Semites that were ruling in Egypt. Semites or Shemites, right? They all come from Shem, one of the sons of Noah. All right? Who are the others? Shem, Ham, and Yafet. All right? Japheth. Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Those in Egypt would have come from the line of Ham. Ham. All right? Ham. Ham. All right? So these Hyksos rulers, these Shemites, were actually cousins of the Hebrews. So this wasn't an Egyptian pharaoh and then Joseph comes up in the ranks. No. His cousins were the ones in ruling power. It was a little bit easier for Joseph to elevate during this time. Pharaoh was not Egyptian, but a Semite. Israel was free and prosperous in Egypt for a very long time. It was divine providence that allowed Joseph to rise to power. Who were these Hyksos and where did they come from? These were the Bedouins, the Semites, the Orientals, the Asians, covering most of, like, I guess, from Turkey, as far west, as far east as Asia, right? So, covering India and Iran and all these places, okay? That's where the Hyksos come from. Sure enough, Joseph is put in charge of the food program. For 7 years of abundance, they would put some stuff aside to prepare for the 7 years where famine would come. Joseph tells Pharaoh, so first he's given the interpretation, and then he's granted wisdom. What are we supposed to do now, knowing that 7 years of abundance followed by famine? Pharaoh says, Joseph, you're in charge. You're the man. You're the face. You're taking care of this food program. It's all on you. What do we do? Joseph tells Pharaoh, listen, throughout all Egypt, 20% of all produce will be stored away for that day 7 years into the future when it would be needed during the lean times. Imagine storing up food for 7 years. 7 years of unusual plenty, unusual abundance. If that were you, if you know, like one day you're comfortable, you're eating every day, and then one year, all of a sudden, there's an abundance of food, an abundance of everything. You don't have to work hard for it. It's unusual. It just falls on your plate. And you think, we have so much food. Why do we need to put any aside? We have so much food, it's going to waste. Like, just enjoy it, man. Why do we have to put it aside? Imagine putting it aside for 7 years, and people are like, why are we putting food aside this long? We're just throwing away 20% of our produce every day. What's the point? We labor, and the earth is giving this to us. Why should we put 20% away? How do you think that the people responded? Was this some kind of conspiracy of the Hyksos rulers to enrich themselves? Oh, there's that Hyksos Pharaoh. And look who he raised second in command. Who's this Joseph guy anyway? He's a Hebrew. This Hyksos and Hebrews, these Semites, what are they doing taking over our land in Egypt? Who do they think they are? Why should we listen to them? Have you ever been disgruntled by the government? Yes, I see some nodding heads. Have you ever been upset about how much taxes you have to pay? How much they take off your paycheck automatically, like they don't even give you the option. It's like, give me what I earn and then I'll pay my taxes. Sometimes you get disgruntled with whoever's in power. Interesting for Pharaoh, he knew that if he put Joseph in charge, that he gets all the credit for the food program, but he also gets all the blame when things go wrong. Kind of reminds me of something that happened about 5-6 years ago. There was one fella in the States that was put in charge of a very important program. And his name was St. Fauci. Remember this guy? So Fauci, he was like the answer to everything. Oh, we have to listen to Fauci. He has all the answers for what we're supposed to do during the COVID pandemic. He knows exactly what, we have to listen to him. And we do everything that he says. And then when things start going wrong, guess who paid the price? It's Fauci. Everybody's like, oh, it was that guy. He told us to do this. He told us to do that. Things didn't go the way that he said they were supposed to go. He got all the credit, and he got all the blame. All right? Any good politician knows, if you don't want to take the blame for things, put somebody else up in power, let them be the one to answer for everything. Right? Poor Fauci. Now you kind of feel bad for the guy. He said, I am science. Trust the science. And then he said, I am science. If you disagree with me, you disagree with science. That's what he said. He elevated himself that way. But you notice Joseph's attitude was very different from Fauci's. He was elevated, but he had a servant attitude. He didn't elevate himself. Pharaoh's the one that gave him the new name. Pharaoh's the one that gave him the position. Pharaoh's the one that gave him a wife to keep his loyalty. But he continued to just follow the wisdom that Jehovah gave him. His entire story, from 17 years old, it seemed like he was being a brat. He was probably a good son to his father. So loved by his father. He went to his brothers, helping them out in the field, sharing his dreams. What did I do? You know, he was a good servant in Potiphar's house. Everything's going great. Everything's fantastic. He's at the top of the chain in Potiphar's house. A woman lies about him and he ends up in prison. What did I do? And then he ends up here in this food program with Pharaoh, the Grand Vizier of Egypt, second ranking in all the land. And when things go south, I can imagine him saying, what did I do? In good times and in bad. From Genesis chapter 42 to 45, we read about how Israel, or Jacob, remember his name was changed to Israel, Jacob's sons go to Egypt for grain. This is during the famine. Where was Jacob living at this time? In the land of Canaan. Okay. In the land of Canaan. And they had to travel, it's about over 200 miles, almost 300 miles, from Canaan to Egypt. Earlier in the story, we read that Joseph went up to find his brothers. He went all the way up to Dothan. He was sold as a slave here along this line, from Dothan all the way to Egypt. But this is where they're dwelling at this point when Joseph is about 30 years old. And the brothers are sent from their father Jacob. Jacob's looking at them, and they're like, what are you guys doing sitting here on your butt? You have nothing to eat. Why are you just staring at yourself? Go to Egypt and get some grain. Imagine that. You got 11 brothers sitting around. They have no food in the land. The famine was so great. When we read that it covered the whole land, it wasn't talking about the whole world. Right? It's talking about the face of the land. And normally, when one area, if Egypt went into a famine because there was a drought or anything like that, normally Canaan would still have their supply. You'll see that they have water supplies both ways. They receive their source of water different ways. It would be very unusual for one country to be in famine while the other one was also in famine. Okay? But this famine was so great that it spanned all this territory and beyond. Okay? No rain, no water, crops are dying, and they'd have to go and get from the store the 20% that was saved for 7 years, all right, there in Egypt. They would have to come and buy the grain. And it wasn't just like money, they would come in bags of silver to buy the grain. How long do you think the money would last you? Do you think it would last you 7 years? You have to keep going back to Egypt to get your stuff. You're not making any crops to make more money yourself. What are you doing? How are you making your livelihood? Some people buy their crops to feed their livestock so that they could at least continue to survive that way. But that could only last so long. I'm sure sometime in those 7 years, the money would run out. What happens when they didn't have silver? They would be expected to sell their livestock. They sell their livestock. When the livestock's not there, they end up selling their land. The land then belongs to Egypt. And when they sell their land, if they're still hungry and they need to eat, guess what they would have to do?
Slaves.
Sell themselves as slaves. Just so that they could eat. So, needless to say, Pharaoh knew full well what he was doing. Joseph was there to help sustain life for people with the food. But Pharaoh's like, hey, we can make a killing off this. We're going to have slaves coming out of everywhere. All right? And all these slaves, imagine just how disgruntled they would be and how that would turn the tables, the powers that are there. Eventually, we find out years later, you know what? The Egyptians, they revolt. They take over those Hyksos rulers. They're out. The Egyptians are back in power. And then they enslave all the Israelites that came. They enslave all the foreigners that came to their land. They're the ones in power, and they would rule with the heavier hands. And of course, we know that story in Exodus. That's much later, right? But they went back and forth, back and forth. They got sent one time. How many brothers went the first time? 10 brothers. There were 11 brothers in the house. Which brother was left behind at home? Benjamin, the baby, right? There was no way that Jacob was going to allow Benjamin to go. He already lost Joseph. He could not stand to lose his little baby, Benjamin. Yes?
There were no instructions to Jacob, right? Like from God. There was no instructions to, hey, why don't you move closer to the food? There was nothing. So there was nothing there. It's just interesting that all the, I guess, communications were, I guess, the provisions were on Joseph's side. I'm not saying that Jacob and his family they were just at a deficit and they just needed to hang on, right? Basically. I don't want to say that that's what happened. And then Jacob had been sent, right?
He had no special favors from God.
Yeah. So not from above. He
Yeah.
had to act,
Yeah.
right? Because he saw what was the reality of what was happening. Okay, so it wasn't like God spoke to him and then he sent his son.
No.
It was just
Out of survival. I mean, you
Out of survival.
hungry, you eat.
Yeah.
You go find your food, right?
so it's just interesting that
Yeah.
it was just, like it was just Joseph was given instructions from above and this is what you do and he stayed on it.
You know, it's interesting. I don't think even so much that Joseph was given instructions. We're not told that.
Yeah, no.
But he was granted wisdom.
Yeah.
In all of Joseph's story, and thank you for bringing that up, in all of Joseph's story, we never see Jehovah speak to Joseph. We know that the patriarchs are only the first three, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We know that Jehovah spoke to them directly. He gave them his covenant and reiterated that covenant with each of the patriarchs. So those first three are considered the patriarchs. Joseph is not a patriarch, but he's the next in line after those first three. And we don't see Jehovah speak to Joseph at any point throughout his story. But we know that Jehovah was with Joseph. Have you ever heard God speak audibly to you? No? Have you got any impressions that he was communicating something to you? Yeah. Maybe, have you ever had a dream that you just felt was so odd, it's not your dream, like maybe he was trying to reveal something to you in that? Some people have those. Even people that are not believers, God meets them in their dreams. Do you know how many Muslims have testimony that God in heaven revealed himself to them in a dream and revealed that Yeshua is his son? And they're so convicted in their dream, when they wake up, they're afraid for their life because their families would disown them. All right? They're afraid because they trust this dream that came to them. And we know that God can give dreams to draw people to him. He'll speak your language. All right? Some people it's dreams. Sometimes it's just wisdom. You don't know where this idea came from, but you act on it, and you're like, where did this come from? I can't take credit for this. You know, it's God inspiring you. It's God giving you what you need in that moment. Right? He's a giver of wisdom. All wisdom comes from him. True wisdom. Not just a good idea. Okay? But true wisdom where you know you cannot take any credit. So that's an interesting part in Joseph's story. I hope we could all walk away with. He never heard God speak, but he trusted that Jehovah was with him. He saw Jehovah was with him because no matter what he did, it prospered. And it wasn't for his own gain, but we see him as favored by his earthly father, and then he falls, and then he's favored by this, our Father in heaven, right? And he's elevated. Yes?
And he's like from 17, right? So that would have given him a lot of know-how of what they were doing in terms of worship, Yahweh, right? Like he would know about that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's in 17, and then 17 to 30 is unknown, except for the major milestone points, right? So it's like he knew enough already, but then,
Yeah, it's almost like, when we send our children off to college,
yeah.
all right, we hope that we had already implanted enough of the values we want them to live their life up with, right? It's about the same age, right, about 17, 18 when they go off to college. And you hope that you have instilled all those values and everything you want them to go live their life with. And then everything's put to the test. Now what we see happen here with Joseph is he continues to acknowledge Jehovah, all right? Don't all interpretations belong to him, all right? When he stands before Pharaoh at 30 years old, he's like, you know what? It's not me that has the interpretation, this comes from God, all right? And then he's prospering and he has the right interpretation for this dream. He's put in charge of this very important program. These are the lives of people, not just in Egypt, but all the surrounding countries coming to them for help, all right, during the famine. Well, let's get back to this here. Jacob orders his sons to go to Egypt for food. He did not allow Benjamin to go along. Common knowledge that it was Joseph that controlled the food program. 20 years had passed since Joseph was sold by his brothers. They didn't recognize him. He was dressed and behaved like an Egyptian. All right. He left as a boy, now he was a mature man. All right. Imagine what it would be like. Joseph standing there, he sees his brothers coming, and he recognizes them. He knows who they are. He's like, oh, these guys. Man,
It's my time.
would you hold a grudge? But you're like, oh, look at them. Now they're coming to me for help, It's like, they didn't need me. They threw me down a well. Look at them coming for help. What should I do? Or maybe he's like, you know what? I'm comfortable. I'm okay. Whatever. Just give them some grain. Let them go. Whatever. I don't know what his attitude was, but we know things have changed. All right? Things have changed for Joseph. Joseph now knows that his dreams as a young boy were true. His brothers bowed down to him, but they didn't recognize him. Joseph accuses them of being spies. They're helpless before this ruler of Egypt. Joseph finds out that his brother Jacob and his father Jacob and his brother Benjamin are still alive. So he puts the brothers into jail for 3 days. All right? Puts them in jail for 3 days. He deals with all his affairs for the food program. But he wanted to come up with some sort of a plan to get his brother Benjamin to come over as well. All right, so I'm not going to go over the whole story. If you're interested in the story to this point, I encourage you to open your Bibles and start reading. The story's there. I don't have to tell it to you. I'm going to fudge it. I'm going to miss details. I want you to read it for yourselves. But it's very interesting because he sends the brothers out, back home. He puts the money that they brought, it was back in their pouches of grain. Everyone had grain, all right? And they go back home, they open up their things, and they're like, oh no, there's money in my sack. Well, what does this mean, right? But they had the grain they needed, they had their money back. Joseph had a plan, they didn't know about it. When they left, they had no idea that Joseph was their brother. But Joseph said, I want you guys to go back home and come back with your youngest brother so that I know you're not spies, you're not lying to me. If I find out you're lying to me, someone's going to pay, right? So they go back home, they try to get their brother Benjamin. When they finally run out of grain, one of the brothers was left behind in Egypt. Which brother was it? Simeon. Simeon, all right? The second brother. He was left behind in Egypt so that Benjamin, they'd have to come back for him and bring Benjamin, all right? At first he said, all of you stay, one of you go back. But after 3 days, he said, okay, Simeon will stay, the rest of you guys go. Bring Benjamin back with you so I know you're not lying, right? They go back and they're like, Dad, we gotta go, we gotta bring Benjamin, otherwise we're gonna keep Simeon. You know, if I was Jacob, I'd be like, tough for Simeon. I got the rest of my sons, you know.
What's interesting in the narrative was that Joseph was the one who inquired whether they had any other brother, just to confirm He was concerned about Benjamin,
Well,
but the brothers didn't pick that up.
he inquired simply because they said, we are 12 brothers.
Yes,
He said, we are 12 brothers. You know, Joseph was asked, who are you? Where are you from? We're from Canaan. We are 12 brothers. Oh, you say you were 12, but I only see 10. Oh, well, we are 10, but the youngest one is at home with our dad, and our other brother is gone. Right? So he hears, oh, the other brother, that's Benjamin. He's still home with dad, so dad's alive. And it's like, okay, comes up with the plan. The wheel starts spinning, but he doesn't want to reveal himself to them just yet. All right?
like a Hallmark movie.
Sure enough, they all come back because they ran out of grain. They had no choice but to go back. Jacob sends them back with all the money that they had in their satchel the first time. He said, just in case it was an oversight, just in case it's a mistake, make sure you bring this money and bring this money because we want to, you know, get your brother back. Get some grain. Right? And he was still hesitant to let Benjamin go. But sure enough, he said, okay, fine. This is the way that it has to be. If we don't come back with Benjamin, they're going to kill us, right? So he had no choice but to send Benjamin. You guys read the rest of the story. There's a lot there. I know I said we're going through Genesis 37 to 50, but I'm keeping the last few chapters for next time. It's a study all on its own, okay? But we find out in Genesis 46 to 47 that this is the way that all of Israel and all his sons, how they all came into the land of Egypt, and all of Israel was saved from the famine. God planted Joseph, all right, in this land of Egypt, gave him the interpretations, gave him the wisdom, put him in charge of the food program. God is sovereign and in control of everything, and he made a way for his people to be saved. Read about that in Genesis 46 to 47. And then in 48 to 50, we see the blessings that Jacob places over all his sons. Israel places over the 12 sons. His last words, last wishes. There's also a blessing that he puts on Joseph's 2 children. Do you remember their names? Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh was the older one. Ephraim was the younger one. They come before Jacob. Jacob didn't really know them, his grandchildren, right? But these 2 Egyptian grandchildren of his come before him, and they receive a blessing from Jacob. Jacob crosses his hands, so his right hand is over the younger child, Ephraim, and the left hand over the older one. It's a God pattern that we're going to discover and look at in our next study, the cross-handed blessing. Before next class, I hope you guys take the time to reread Genesis 37 up to this point, and then focus in on Genesis 48 to 50, okay, to prepare for next class. It's very important. That these 2 Gentile grandsons are adopted away from Joseph, and that's how Joseph gets the double blessing, the double portion. It's split between his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay? Through all of this, we see at the very end, Genesis 50, 19 to 20, this is after Jacob dies. And they bury their father, and the brothers are afraid. Oh no, now that dad's gone, Joseph might try to have his revenge with us now, you know? Dad's not here to protect us. What are we going to do? And Joseph hears him and he turns to them. He says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You meant to do me harm, but God meant it for good, so that it would come about as it is today, with many people's lives being saved. All right, what lessons have you guys picked up from the story today? Yeah.
I just realized that when you were saying how Ephraim and Manasseh were the Gentiles, because that's like, Ephraim represents us, right? Like we're the lost
The
tribe.
fullness of the Gentiles.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and Israel is like, this is another God pattern, right? Where he's calling the Gentiles, like that's what Jesus did. Like that was the difference when he said like, now all these animals you can eat. When he was saying, was that Peter? Yeah, to Peter, right? But he's basically saying like, you who are not part of the family, I'm going to adopt you, and now you are part of the family.
Adoption's huge. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
They're grafted in,
Yeah,
right? They become part of the house of Israel.
yeah.
And that's how the whole house of Israel is saved. We're going to be talking more about that, the grafted in, the fullness of the Gentiles. That's part of our next study. Anybody else? Any aha moments? Any patterns that you saw?
7 years, all the 7 sevens.
All the 7-7, the completions.
But what, it's mind-boggling to me that the 10 brothers never come out clean to their father of what they did to Joseph. It's just the whole time, they're probably being convicted too, but they never came out clean. Just,
Until they say, oh, Joseph's alive. What? Yeah. How about you guys? Yeah,
I
Carol.
would say names, like pay attention to the names, because I kind of, when I was reading if you read it again, where it said, Jacob said blah, 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 and then all of a sudden, Israel said blah, 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 so you're like, sometimes you're like, wait, is this, you know it's Israel, you know it's Jacob, back and forth, but then you have to wonder, why was it in this paragraph where Jacob's name was literally right there, said XYZ, or it is what it did, and then next couple of sentences over, Israel said that. So you do have to wonder, because sometimes, like, yes, names and details are very important.
Yep.
I came across a sermon where God is in the details. So you have to go a lot deeper in that, and that was my aha moment. And I asked him about it. It's like, why was it Jacob here and then Israel there? But then I kind of reread it. It's like, okay, so Jacob kind of said it in a certain tone that is very human and real. And then Israel, same person, sounded like he had a little more wisdom in this and enlightenment.
Yeah.
So when you're reading certain aspects, I guess, the Bible and Scripture, you do have to pay attention to, and not just read. There's reading, and then there's actually like reading to really absorb it. And that's where you miss details.
Thanks for that. Yeah, the Jacob, Israel, yeah, it continues on even through the rest of the scriptures.
Can
Yeah.
I answer his question? Just like when I was a kid. When I'm doing good, my mother will call me Manny. When I'm not listening, Emmanuel. Same thing. To get our attention.
Get the whole name.
Full name, please.
Full name. Yeah, I think when Jacob is used, more of the time is talking to the human side. It's just talking about the man, Jacob. When he's referred to as Israel, a lot of the time it's also pointing toward the future and the purpose of why they're being saved as a people, right? Yeah, there's a lot of that happens. It continues on. Even through the rest of Scripture, you're going to see the nation of Israel sometimes referred to as Jacob. And it's because he's pointing out their humanity where they're falling away, they're not fulfilling the purposes of God. And so sometimes it would be referred to as Jacob. Right? Anybody else? Anything? If you were there in Egypt and you got a warning that there are 7 years of famine about to come, you could choose to trust it or not. It would probably be wiser to trust anyway. If you have full abundance for 7 years, what's 20%? What's putting a little bit aside? You know? Wouldn't it be wiser to just do that instead of saying, oh, well, we don't know what's going to happen. Is it actually going to happen? Why don't we just use up everything now? There's a warning that we've been given, that we are soon facing the end days. The end is very near. And it's not like we have to save up our crops and all that stuff because it's going to, get destroyed anyway when God comes back. But how are we preparing ourselves? How are we using our time? What do we give our mind to? Do we have enough space for God in our lives so that when he comes again, we would be prepared to meet our Maker? The warnings have been given time and time again. It would be wise for us to start our day with our mind on God. End our day with our mind on God. And throughout the day, remember that the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Yeshua, is with us. Just as Jehovah was with Joseph. And even if we're not sure what's going to happen, we have to remember to live our lives like Joseph. Remembering that all that we have, it comes from God. That He is ultimately in control. And we are but servants for the Most High God. Live your life as a good steward of everything that God has entrusted to you. However much or however little it is, do the best with what is in front of you. And do it for His honor and His glory, not for your gain. Not for your name, but for His. Okay?
Our retirement plans are to the 20%. Our RSPs.
Your retirement plans are part of the 20%. There are practical ways, all right, in how you can prepare. Right? Yes?
That's why God said, lay your treasures in heaven. And, what will it profit a man against the whole world and use his own soul? So invest our resources on something to advance His kingdom rather than building an empire.
Amen. Amen. Yep, store up your treasures in heaven. My mother always said, it's like, oh, she asks us to do a favor, and then she'll say, oh, you'll be richly rewarded in heaven. I'm like, I want to be richly rewarded now, man. Give me a toonie. But yeah, the things that are eternal, the things that continue on, these are the things that we ought to be doing, how we ought to be living our lives. So not so much storing up your material wealth, all right? But outdoing one another in honor, serving each other, give a listening ear, help others when they need help. If somebody asks you for help, don't deny them the help that they're asking for. Even if you have nothing to give, you know what? God will give you something to give. All right? Because you're doing so in obedience to Him. God will never ask us to do anything that He hasn't provided us what we need in order to carry it out. And just like Joseph, sometimes you'll feel like you're stuck. You're in prison, there's nothing you can do. But no matter where you are, you can always honor God. Find ways to honor Him. Whatever little ways it is. If you see somebody sad and alone, sit next to them. Give them a smile. Do something. Lift their spirit. You know what? That's part of storing up treasures in heaven. You see a person, you care about them. The way that God sees your heart and He cares about you. When we love each other, that's how we show our love for God. When we care for one another, that's how we show our love for God. If we don't care about other people, all we care about is ourselves and what we're dealing with, and boo-hoo, poor me, help me, help me. Some of the people that I have seen help the most are the ones that seem like they have very little. That's been my experience. I know there are a lot of people that they're struggling themselves, but they're the ones that are so ready to help, when there's a need. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. There's so many things. Those are a few things that I picked up in the story for Joseph. And whatever it is, whatever message God has for you when you read His Word, I pray you get that message. I pray that it starts to turn your heart a little bit. And I pray that whatever lesson you're learning, that you'd be ready to share that with somebody. You have no idea what you're learning, what it might do to help somebody else when you share it. All right? Guys, let's get on the Torah portions. If you haven't been with us yet, we're here at the end of Genesis. Next week we're starting the book of Exodus. So let's do the portions. All right, let's do it together. It's so much fun. Today we covered like 3 or 4 sections already, all in one sitting. Imagine what you could do with your friends. Last week we got on a group call, right, during home groups. We didn't go to each other's home because there's sickness and everything, but we were able to get online and do a WhatsApp video call And to see all of our Access group friends together again, that was awesome. On our off week, the last Saturday of every month, we have the opportunity to have home groups. I'm not facilitating a discussion, but you have the Torah portion. You can get together with your own households, with your own circle of friends, do a group call, and do the portion together. All right, there's discussion questions in the handouts that we provide, the digital handouts that we provide, study questions, discussion questions, and a true and false quiz. All right, this is for you to, not true and false, a multiple choice quiz, just to help you along in your study. All right. So next week we're going to be studying Genesis 48 up to 50. All right, so please be prepared next week, having read that, so we don't have to go through all of it. We don't want to sit through reading all of it. All right, let's come prepared. May the grace of our Lord Yeshua, the shalom of Yehovah our Father, be with us all.
Amen. Thank you.